and welcome back to week 2 of the Miami University Sports Podcast. I'm Jack Miller here for week 2 with Ted Brennan. Ted, how are we feeling?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Can't complain. It's a beautiful Thursday afternoon, so got plenty to talk about this week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I assume we were both at Jaeger this weekend.
Unfortunately, no. So I had bought my ticket or, purchased my student ticket like 2 weeks ago. I saw it put into my wallet, wake up Saturday morning, getting excited, check my phone, ticket's missing, email's gone. And I emailed the ticket office and they were like, yeah, it might have been a glitch in our system. Unfortunately, can't give you a ticket or because you don't have it, can't go. But it's okay. I watched from home, but I had a couple of my friends go, and they said it was, one of the coolest things I've ever experienced at Jaeger. I mean, the house was packed, the stadium was full, just an absolutely incredible sight.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've talked to that's had ticketing issues. There were people, and I know they advocated against it, but I know people went down without downloading their tickets, and then obviously the cesspool of people that it was down there, you couldn't get cell service or any sort of internet connection, so just had no chance of downloading their ticket. Yeah, to go off that point, Jaeger was an absolute madhouse. I mean, that was the first time in my 5 years here where I've not been able to get a phone call to go through, much less get internet service.
Yeah.
You couldn't get any sort of connection from on the field, press box. We had people fighting over Ethernet routers at my apartment. It was kind of insane, but it was super fun to be a part of. Awesome to be on the field for it and on the sidelines watching that game. Probably the biggest game Miami's going to have at Jaeger Stadium for the next at least 2-3 years, as far as we know the schedule. I know that we were supposed to have Mizzou next year. I don't think that's happening anymore.
I think that game was bought out. Yeah, Mizzou's been buying out a lot of games.
Which is, that's fair. I don't think they were expecting to be in contention for the playoff this soon. So I understand it, but last time that Jaeger's going to be that full for a while. Hopefully not. Hopefully this is the start of something bigger for Miami students and for Jaeger and for Miami football. But in the case that it is, it was really cool to be a part of. So yeah, just going in on some of the numbers about that. 8,400 students, which is the record. I think it was a 20-year-old record, which we broke, and then 24,000 fans, which is their first sellout, at least since I've been here. That's insane numbers for Miami football and for MAC football. That's really cool.
Yeah, and one of the cool things that are about that game was it was more Miami fans than opposing fans. A lot of the times when you see kind of these higher numbers, it's more of the opposing fans. But this time it was truly Miami, grounded. And there were a lot of Miami students there all weekend long and into this week. People have just been talking about this game and talking about being there and the experience of being there. Unfortunately, it didn't go Miami's way, which we'll get into in a little bit, but the atmosphere that was at that game is still rippling through Oxford's campus right now.
No, absolutely. And credit to UC, even though they didn't have the majority of the crowd, they were still very vocal and it made for a very awesome environment. Obviously, there were some clips that went around social media. I'm not sure if you saw, but the UC fans, either uptown or at Jaeger, just getting chirped. There's some friendly banter going back and forth, but that's what college football is about. That's what we love to see, and it's really cool to have that experience in a place that really doesn't get that very often. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it's a 128-year-old rivalry, right? Most of these fans from UC or Miami, they probably had parents and grandparents or relatives who have been to Miami, who have experienced the UC Miami game, and it's very generational. And I feel like this time round, people really felt that generational kind of, maybe my dad got to experience it or my grandfather or whoever got to experience, but now I get to experience it, and it's on Miami's campus and for the first time in however many years it was. And it just had a much different feel, and it felt much more personal this time around than just going to Nippert or going to Paycor Stadium.
Right. All right, well, let's jump right into the actual game. Obviously, we all know the outcome, 26-17. That's a tough loss. It's 0-2 for Miami now in the season. Granted, those are two Power 5 opponents who are both looking to have really good seasons in their respective conferences, but you're only as good as your record says you are. And Miami starts 0-2. Ted, any big takeaways to start with from the game on Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the score is a little misleading. This was a very good game from Miami's standpoint. Obviously, you had the one or two mistakes that led to kind of the big chunk plays, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But at least from a Miami standpoint, this team looked more complete than they did a week ago or 2 weeks ago against Northwestern. Maybe that extra week helped them out. But this was a much more well-rounded team than we saw 2 weeks ago up in Evanston.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Obviously, there are still elements that are missing. We'll get into the run game in a little bit, but it was nice to see Gabbert open up the passing game a little bit more. That he had 2 connections off the top of my head that went for over 50 yards, which obviously was missing against Northwestern. And to stretch the field a little bit is going to be crucial, especially against Notre Dame and against UMass coming up, and then obviously into conference play. But the defense, again, Chuck Martin said it at post game. The score won't indicate it, but that was a better defensive performance than we saw against Northwestern.
Yeah, the defense looked the part, and they played the part. And when you're going up against a Power 5 school, it can be a little tough to figure out, how your defense is going to mesh up against a Power 5 offense. But Miami's defense is their strong point, and they played very well for a MAC school against a Power 5 school. And then, like you said, Brett Gabbert looked a lot better as we can kind of dive into the offense side of the ball for Miami last game. He had 339 yards, 2 touchdowns. You alluded to Gabbert being able to take the top off of the defense. He had a 58-yard touchdown to Reggie Virgil. He had another 50-yard completion to Cade McDonald, and he had a 43-yarder when the game before, I want to say he didn't have a pass over 20 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be huge for Miami's offense. I think that first game against Northwestern, Gabbert was still shaking off the rust. I know we talked about that in the last podcast, but this time around, the rust wasn't there as much. And the ability to take these deep shots, these downfield shots, is going to help out this Miami offense a lot, especially if the running game isn't going, where if they can use the whole field, whether it's downfield, midfield, short field, that offense is going to be much more versatile, and it's going to be much harder to stop. And I would love to see Gabbert take more of these downfield shots to a Reggie Virgil or Javon Tracy or Cade McDonald if it's safe. He had that one interception at the beginning, first possession of the game, and it was a bad read. Chucked it up in the double coverage, tried to go for his tight end. Why am I forgetting his name?
That was cool.
Yes, sorry, Jack Coldiron. My apologies to Jack Coldiron. But he tried to go up top to Jack Coldiron, threw it in the double coverage, and it was picked off. If he can eliminate some of those bad reads, which, again, he didn't have a ton of them, that was a big one. That was a big momentum killer. But if those kinks can get worked out, this Miami offense will be humming.
Yeah, I think the term I like that you used there was momentum killer. I think that was kind of the theme of this game, where it looked like Miami had a couple of chances to really turn the momentum, and then Cincinnati just bounced right back and killed the momentum, essentially. Obviously the interception's a big one. There was a couple times where we get to 3rd and long and just not be able to get the stop, and they'd pick up a 3rd and long. The one that really crushed, I thought it really crushed morale in the stadium was the 65-yard touchdown run. We brought the score within one score. Okay, now's where we strike. We get a 3-and-out. We're rolling again. But no, the first play they roll out and get a 65-yarder. I feel like that kind of put the nail in the coffin. Even though there was a chance to bring the ball down the field and tie up the game, I think that was the point where the fans started to realize that I think this one's going to get away from us.
Yeah, you said it best last week. The run defense needs to be better. It needs to sharpen up. And for the most part, it was doing better than what we saw against Northwestern. But you're right, that 65-yard score by Evan Pryor was an absolute momentum killer. Miami was right there. Cincinnati was right there for the taking for Miami. All they needed was, I think it was 2 more stops. I think it was a 2nd down run.
Yep.
And Pryor just broke through the line. He broke a couple of tackles, which was another big problem for Miami's defense this week. It felt like they needed 3 or 4 guys to tackle someone,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what's going to happen if you keep giving up these plays. The defense is going to get worn down. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but they got to sharpen up.
Yeah. Post game, Coach Martin said he thought that they played pretty good rush defense. He thought they did. The numbers suggest otherwise, but that's to each their own. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It felt like Corey Kiner, especially, like Coach Martin emphasized that like they thought he played him really well, but he still had 6 yards to carry. Evan Pryor, I mean, you take away the 65 yarder and the yards per carry doesn't look as good, but there's still good numbers there. So I mean, we're facing one of the best teams in the country, despite their loss next week, or this week, I guess, in Notre Dame. Those kind of things need to be better. Those things need to be improved upon as we get towards MAC play, because the way things are going right now, like teams gashed us for run production last year, and if things don't change, it's going to be the same story this year.
I do wonder what Coach Martin qualifies as improvement or better run defense. I don't know if there's a number that he has on the board before every game saying, hey, if we can limit our opponents to under this number, we're in a good spot, we're in an improvement, or whatever it is. I do wonder that, because if he's saying it's an improvement, we kind of have to take him at his word, even though the numbers, like you said, don't necessarily suggest that. But it will be interesting to see what he says down the line about some of these rushing performances that we could see if the defense doesn't improve.
Right. Well, I just want to highlight one player for UC that I thought was super impressive, but also probably the most unlucky person on the face of the planet on Saturday, and the tight end Joe Royer. Super, super impressed with him. He played excellent football. It was a threat pretty much every time he got the football, but also was the most unlucky person I think I've ever seen in a football game on Saturday. Right at the end of the first half, makes 3 men miss, like ducking under people, reaches out for the end zone, gets the ball knocked out at the last possible second. Great defensive play, a testament to Miami's defense and their effort, especially in that first half. And it was good throughout the entire game, but holding Cincy to 10 in the first half was super impressive. Obviously, it could have been 17 if Royer got in, but still, that was the first thing that Royer did. And then I think it was like 75-yard, it's like short pass that went for a touchdown that got called back for an illegal man downfield that's still being contested on social media, whether or not it was. I mean, I'll leave that to the viewers' own devices to make their own call on that. We can all be couch referees, but yeah, it still got called back. But I mean, even without those 2 plays, he was still super impressive.
Absolutely. They mentioned on the broadcast, because again, I had to watch from home, but they mentioned on the broadcast, Royer is a big body tight end. He is your stereotypical big body vertical threat tight end. And he showed that, he's a large man. He made people miss. And credit to Brian Ugu on that play. He usually plays on the right side of the defensive line, right endish, hybrid linebacker. He was on the right side of the field. Royer was on the near side of the field when he was diving for his touchdown. That is a long run for Ugu to not give up on the play. He could have easily given up on the play when it went to the other side, but credit to Brian Ugu. But as you mentioned, Joe Royer was robbed a little bit. He got his moment. He got his touchdown, but he was robbed of a big, big game.
Yeah, I saw a lot of tweets while I was covering the game, and then after the game when I was finishing my write-up, saying that that is a draftable tight end. That is someone who has the skills to play on Sundays. Whether or not he will, I'm no NFL scout. I'm just saying my opinion. I think he's a guy you could look at and be comfortable putting him in a tight end room in the NFL.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move on. We talked about it a little bit already, but the rushing attack, it was a problem again. It was a problem against Northwestern. It was a problem again this week. Coach Martin admitted after the game that he said he should have kind of changed his game plan and moved away from the run game a little bit. I have the quote here. He said he should have made it 7-on-7 and really started to open up the passing game. But he also said that running the ball is his team's identity. Like, this is the thing that they've been known for the last couple of years. And obviously not having Amos here hurts to kind of establish that. But that's the identity of Coach Martin's teams. And you didn't really see it on Saturday. Like, Kevin Davis led the team in yards per carry, and he got 3 attempts. Granted, he got 14 yards and 4.7 yards per carry, but Three carries is just not, that's not a bell cow back that we had last year. It's not 20 attempts. It's not 25 attempts. It's what we had in 2023. And second on our team in rushing was, I'll give you $5 if you can name who it was.
I have our script up right now, so I don't want to take your money, but for the listeners and the viewers at home, it was Henry Hessen, the backup quarterback for Miami, who was in for one drive. It was the last drive of the game, and he was second in the team in rushing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 13 yards on 2 attempts, which, granted, it was the end of the game, so defense wasn't exactly looking to stop the run, but still, like that's not exactly encouraging numbers week 2 in the seat. Like we've had 3 weeks to kind of work out the errors here. Like what needs to happen before we go into next week?
I wish I could tell you, because I'm honestly at a loss for words with how bad this rushing attack looks. And I think it goes back to last year, how Miami found their, as you put it, they found their bell cow. And they were so reliant on Rashad Amos to get the job done that some of these other backs didn't necessarily have to focus on their running game. They were more receiving backs, or they were more blocking backs. And at the end of the day, they lose those reps, and now they're thrust into a starting job. And I think part of it is also that none of them know who's going to get the most carries any game. It's a running back by committee on a team that needs a bell cow back.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't a team that, personally, I don't believe that this is a team that can survive without having a true number one running back and just throwing different running backs into the game. It feels like Miami needs Rashad Amos again, and it feels like Rashad Amos needs Miami. He's down at Ole Miss. He's only got 5 carries for 55 yards, and he's been playing in, the tail ends of the games. He's not playing. He's not starting. He's playing in the mop-up time.
Yeah, well, as the old saying goes, the grass isn't always greener. Yeah, I mean that would have definitely helped this year. It felt like on Saturday that what worked for 2023 Redhawks was the run game would open up the pass game. So you get your 4-yard gain, your 5-yard gain, and then the defense has to adjust to that. They have to load the box. They have to step up. And that's when Brett, or in last year it would be Avion, would take the top off, and we'd have those long gains and we'd have those big plays. This year it's been more of the short, almost like bubble screen or like little 2-yard hitches that we've been doing to try and get the defense to step up, because the run game hasn't been able to draw the defense in.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you mentioned a small little tidbit in there, which I want to expand on a little bit, is the loss of Avion Smith. When Brett Gabbert comes back, you almost expect this kind of resurgent offense from the Redhawks, because it's Brett Gabbert. He's been here for a while. He knows the system. He is a great quarterback when he's at the top of his game.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't have what Avion Smith has, which is the ability to draw the defense in with his legs. Right. Most of Martin's offense last year was these RPOs, run pass options, read options, triple options, speed options, and the loss of Gage Larvidan, who is yet to record a single meaningful stat at South Carolina. The loss of Gage Larvidan, that hurts as well. But the team was so heavily focused on the run game last year, and now it's almost like throwing together a whole new system, because Gabbert's back. You don't have Kenny Tracy, who is supposed to be that number one back. You don't have Rashad Amos, who has transferred, and you don't have Avion Smith, who can pull defenses in when he runs a read option or an RPO.
Right.
And that kind of going from a scrambler, elusive quarterback to a pocket passer like Gabbert. I mean, you saw Gabbert couldn't escape the pocket when it was collapsing.
Right.
He took a decent amount of sacks that just killed the drive because he couldn't break the pocket. And I think that's something we're going to see throughout the rest of the year is how does that offensive line hold up? And then how does Gabbert hold up? How does he try to escape the pocket a little bit more, or can he escape the pocket a little bit more? And if he were to get hurt, where does Miami go? Because Miami had the luxury of these good backup quarterbacks who can start at other programs. A couple years ago, it was AJ Mayer. He went to like North Alabama or something like that, and then Avion Smith, he was at Alabama A&M, or he's at Alabama A&M now. So
yeah,
those are some small questions that we can cross if we ever get there, but it'll be interesting. It feels like the Red Hawks are learning a whole new system.
Yeah. I want to kind of pivot back to that backup quarterback point. We haven't really seen enough of Hessen or Maddox Kopp, the Colorado transfer, to really make a judgment on that. Maybe they are that option that we just haven't seen yet. I mean, I don't want to judge Hessen or Kopp based on the performance in the Appalachian State game last year in the Cure Bowl, because, I mean, no quarterback could have conceded in those conditions. Like that was just a slip and slide game. Like trying to throw the football just would not have happened. Trying to run the football wasn't happening. I think the final score off the top of my head was like 9-6.
I think it was 13-9.
Oh, well,
yeah, your point still stands.
It wasn't exactly like a full representation of their talents, and we saw Hessen can move the ball with his legs. Granted, the defense was sat further back, but I think further down the line, the question, obviously, I'm not suggesting benching Gabbert. That'd be a headline for sure, but towards the middle of the season, if the run game isn't working, maybe we go to like almost a Michigan type system where you have a passer and then you have a running quarterback.
That may be something Martin has to consider down the line, but I think from what we've seen, he's going to stick with Gabbert through the highs and the lows. However, it was interesting how Gabbert was benched for that last drive. I don't know if it was injury concern. I don't know if it was because Martin didn't want to put another interception on him, or Martin thought the game was too far gone at that point. But I remember watching it in my living room with my roommates, and we were all like, "Okay, wait a second, what's going on here? Why is Hessen out there?" And it was just weird. It was a weird feeling to see Hessen out there, and that's no shot at Hessen. It was just where did that come from?
Right. All right. Well, obviously a disappointing loss, 27-16. 0-2 on the season. Credit to Cincinnati. Good win. But time to look forward to week 3. We've got Notre Dame at Notre Dame Stadium. Always a tough matchup. And we have a special guest this week. We have our first special guest of the season. Welcoming on Tim Daniel. Tim, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
What's up, guys? Cool to be here.
Welcome aboard. Welcome to the Miami Redhawks podcast.
Yeah, I'm liking it. I'm really liking what you guys are doing with this. So it's been really great addition to the network. We're all definitely appreciative of it.
Well, if you're familiar with the Riverfront, Tim obviously needs no introductions. But for any of those viewers who may be new, Tim, do you want to introduce yourself real quick before we jump in?
Yeah, sure. So I am a director of college content here at the Riverfront. So I basically make sure guys like Jack and Ted get their content up for you all for any post-game coverage for Miami athletics. We also cover Xavier, which we may be locking down a writer for that finally. So news to follow. Since Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. And then I also host Late Night Reds, our Sunday night live show on the Riverfront Reds stream. So
awesome. Well, let's jump right into Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame's made some headlines this year, but let's start with what Coach Martin said at his presser this week, where he called Notre Dame Stadium one of the best venues in the world. I've never been. I'm psyched to go. I'm leaving bright and early
for you. Yeah.
Psyched. Bright and early on Saturday morning. I'll be hitting the road. Planning on leaving here around 5 a.m. So it's going to be a long day, but yeah. But Tim, have you been? Like, can you give me a heads up on what's it going to look like?
So I've been as a fan and I've been as a media member.
Okay.
It's the coolest thing, man. So even if you're not a fan of Notre Dame, which 90% of the country is not, obviously, walking in there, it's just so special, man. And it's just like seeing the field for the first time. There's nothing like it. And then I don't know how it is at other schools. I've only done football at Notre Dame. But last 5 minutes of the game, I'll tell you guys a funny story about this. So last 5 minutes of the game, they bring you down to the field so that way you can go right to the press conference, because the press conference is right inside the tunnel, the infamous tunnel. This is where the media room is for downstairs for pressers. So my first game I worked there, it was Notre Dame USC under the lights. This is the Sean Kaiser year when people were like, Sean Kaiser might be the first pick in the draft year. That obviously went south pretty fast. But I made a wrong turn when I was going down from the press box, and I ended up on the wrong side of the field. So game's over, and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta get over there. So I go up to a security guy, and I'm like, hey, do you need me to walk the sideline? He's like, are you media? I said, yes, sir, I am. He goes, go across the field. So I just in the middle of it's Notre Dame USC, game's just ended. Notre Dame wins. Crowd's nuts. I just went there and stood at the 50-yard line, just kind of looked around, took it all, and I was like, man, I don't think I'm ever gonna be able to do this again. So it's unbelievable. And Jack, I can tell you, it's probably the best media catering you'll ever have. They go all out in the spread. So
sweet. Yeah, I can't wait for that. All right, well, let's jump right into how Miami's going to deal with it. First thing I wanted to ask is how important, this is a young Miami team going through obviously experience too, but there are some young pieces like guys like Luke Evans, Ryan Strader, these younger guys. How important is it for these young guys to get this mega stadium environment early in their career? This is probably for guys like Luke Evans and these freshmen, this is probably, they're still in single digits for college games under their belt. So how important is it to get accustomed to these environments and kind of learn how to handle these maybe hostile, loud crowds?
You're asking me or Ted here? I'm sorry.
Both of you.
Okay. I think it's really cool, man. It's something where no matter what happens the rest of your college career, you have that under your belt. You got to play at Notre Dame Stadium. For those young guys, yeah, this is kind of, no disrespect intended to any MAC schools, probably going to be the most hostile environment you play in. Not that Notre Dame's bad fans. There are bad Notre Dame fans, but not that they're bad fans per se, but they're very passionate about their team. They will be into it every moment. It's unbelievable, man. The atmosphere it's insane. And especially now they made it a real football stadium. There's a Jumbotron. They play music. It's pretty neat. How they came up with the times. But Jackie, you could probably relate from being a Cubs fan, just how much they renovated Wrigley in the last few years. But I think that for those guys, this is going to be awesome, man. This is, no matter what happens in the field, and you got to feel pretty good about your talented team. You got to feel good that you might be able to and steal one from Notre Dame, especially because they've already had that issue with the MAC team on their home field.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ted, I'm going to put this next question to you. NIU, obviously, MAC school, made some headlines, beaten Notre Dame at their field. What do you think they did that made them so successful? And what can Miami hold on?
One of the things that they did was minimize Riley Leonard's impact. He had 5.1 yards per completion. He had a 27 QBR rating. And it brought up a lot of questions about Leonard's ability to lead a team like Notre Dame. He's a kid from Duke. He played 3 years at Duke, was pretty successful, all things considered, for Duke football, not known as a big powerhouse. And he gets the call to be Notre Dame's next QB. And he's kind of underperformed, especially for Notre Dame quarterback standards. He was good against Texas A&M, but as we saw, he really, really struggled against Northern Illinois, which is not something you hear every day. And he was okay against Purdue. Purdue is not a very good FBS school, regardless of how much Purdue fans will try to tell you that. But his strengths come from his legs. He's a really good running quarterback. He's got 11 carries, 100 yards, 3 TDs so far this year. The issue is, if you take away his legs, what does he do after that? Where does he go from there? And the answer is really nowhere. If looking at the Purdue game, he only had 11 completions, and all of them were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and 2 of them were behind it. What does the ceiling become for Notre Dame if that is the production you're getting? The longest pass in his season last season was 47 yards. Gabbert did that twice on Saturday, and he's more than capable of doing it again. The longest pass in Leonard's career is 81 yards, but that's inflated because it was an 81-yard catch and run. It was a 20-yard pass, and that came 2 years ago against Northwestern. So for Miami, what they're going to have to do is very similar to what Northern Illinois did, where they play a lot of they're going to play in a lot of flats. This is what I think they should do. They should play a lot of flats, cover the short yardage, cover over the middle, force Leonard to beat you with his legs. If he begins beating you with his legs, change it up a little bit. I don't see them changing it up too much. And force Leonard to throw it deep. Force him to make those long passes where he's going to be uncomfortable throwing the ball. And even so, this offensive line, too, which is a strong suit for Notre Dame, they have 2 injuries.
Yeah.
Their starting right guard, he got injured. Bill Strouth, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, ankle injury. He's out for multiple weeks. And then center Ashton Craig had a brutal knee injury, and he's being replaced by Pat Coogan, who has offensive line experience. He was part of the offensive line last year, which was one of the greatest offensive lines in Notre Dame's history. But he's never played center before. He hasn't taken a single snap at center. And when that happens, you're going to have a lot of mistakes. Miami needs to capitalize on the fact of making Coogan uncomfortable as much as they can, and especially with an experienced defensive line like Miami has, making Coogan uncomfortable and then making the backup right guard, Rocco Spindler, uncomfortable. That's where they're going to win most of their matchups.
Yeah, Tim, anything to add to that?
No, it's funny that we're talking about a situation where in order to make this quarterback lose, you should make him throw the ball. It's not something you hear pretty often. I think Ted nailed it on the head. I mean, Leonard's shown an ability so far that, yeah, he can make things happen with his legs. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns on the year. Notre Dame as a team has 2 passing touchdowns. They're both from Stephen Jelly in the second half of the Purdue game when they were up 42-0, and they put him in there to get some run. I think Kevin Minchie may have had one, actually, maybe 3. I think Kevin Minchie had one in the fourth quarter because they're redshirting CJ Carr. But yeah, Miami, I mean, they're obviously a team you can't take lightly. Brett Gabbert, I think, is this is the kind of quarterback that beats Notre Dame. He's kind of that kind of guy. So this is going to be a really, really interesting matchup. I think what's going to be really fun is Miami. You guys, as you've written quite a bit so far this year, Jack, Miami's got a really talented group of wide receivers, and Notre Dame probably has the best secondary in the country with guys like Ben Morrison, Xavier Watts, Christian Gray. There's a ton of talent back there. Patrick Givens. So that's going to make it really, really kind of interesting, is kind of seeing the matchup of the Miami wide receivers against Notre Dame secondary. And I saw the face, and I know you're probably bring up the long touchdown against Northern Illinois. That kid could not have made a better throw in his life than the throw he made for that 85-yard touchdown. There's no way that gets completed like in a regular game. It was just like right between Benjamin Morrison and the safety, and it was like, that guy will never throw that needle ever again.
No, I was just thinking that there's a lot of people in our state of Ohio that would have
That's true.
That's true. I claim that you got the best secondary in the country with Caleb Downs and Denzel Burke up there in Columbus. But
yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah, they're good.
I respect it. I respect the confidence. I want to ask you, Ted, about Tim. Sorry, the 2 T's is really going to throw me off. Sorry. The Huskies rushing attack against Notre Dame. They ran for 190 yards on the ground.
Yeah, that was not good.
Obviously, Miami's run rushing attack has been lackluster so far this year. Do you see that changing against Notre Dame, or what do you think happens with this?
Yes, I think Purdue didn't run the ball pretty well last week, if I remember correctly. I think they kind of switched stuff up. Guys like Howard Cross, obviously being there. Here's a big veteran. Jack Kaiser, who's a vet, who's in his 6th year. I suspect Notre Dame's probably made those corrections. Al Golden doesn't like for those things to happen, obviously. So I do suspect that they'll probably be able to kind of pick back there and get more successful. But you definitely got to be worried. Miami obviously has a really good, talented group of skill players. I know they're 0-2, but I still think, in my honest opinion, they're the team that's going to win the MAC. I just think that, Northwestern, UC, and Notre Dame your first 3 weeks, and they very well could beat Notre Dame. I'm not going to sit here and talk about like this is a guaranteed win. I'm not that guy, obvious reasons. But I think they'll be able to run the ball. I think they'll be able to kind of keep Notre Dame off the field. But where I'm concerned is like, can they have the 9-10 minute drive? I mean, well, that's too long. The 7-8 minute drives. Is that a possibility in this game? And I don't know if they have that in them, especially with the injuries they have in their skill positions. But I still think that they're a team that's talented enough to kind of get a few chunk plays against Notre Dame.
Yeah, Ted, anything?
Yeah, I think Tim talked a lot about how versus NIU, the defensive tackles struggled to get into their gaps. A lot of the times they were missing where they needed to be at the right time, and then the next play they'd be where they needed to be, but it was the play before. Where they needed to be the play before. But against Purdue is a much different story. They looked a lot more competent. They were hitting their gaps. And for Miami, that's not what you want to hear after their running game was held to less than 30 yards. And like to mention, some key players, Howard Cross III. Fun fact, I actually got to meet his dad a couple years back at Giant Stadium at MetLife. Great guy. So rooting for Howard Cross III and Riley Mills too. Some of these and Kaiser as well. And the Notre Dame defensive line is very experienced, and it helps a lot when you have a Miami line or Miami offensive line that's also very experienced. A lot of returning starters on that side. So the running defense should be a lot better for Notre Dame. But if Miami is able to wear them down and hit some of their weak points, now that Jordan Bathello, another guy who just had a knee injury, he just had to get carted off the field. That was a really tough watch. Hope he's doing okay. It was another bad knee injury. But if Miami is able to hit some of those weak points and expose some of the players who are coming in to fill these holes, maybe that opens up their offense a little bit. I'm actually kind of the opposite of Tim right now. I would love to see Miami win, but if they can't establish a running game, this quote unquote best secondary in
watch it now
in college football
it's real
is gonna shut down any of Miami's passing game. So I am a little bit worried that if the running game doesn't progress from last week, then it's going to be a very, very disgusting offensive game for Miami.
I think Tim said it best, where Gabbert is the type of quarterback that can beat Notre Dame. And we've seen it this year. Notre Dame is beatable by a MAC school. Like they're not invincible. They're not untouchable. So I think you're absolutely right, Ted, if the run game's not there, don't force it, which I think we did a little bit on Saturday. But if they're able to make the adjustments and kind of go into that short pass game, like the hitch or the screen game, that was actually really effective on Saturday. I mean, Cade McDonald probably had 2 20-yard catches on screens. If they're able to establish a little bit of a short passing game, maybe that takes the top off of that secondary and Virgil can break one. And if Miami's defense that is very good is able to hold Notre Dame to, 20, 25 points into the fourth quarter, that turns into a winnable game for Miami if they can get some of the offensive issues figured out. Obviously, that's a tough ask considering how the offense has looked the last 2 weeks, but it's not impossible. We've seen teams bounce back. Notre Dame put up 14 points against a MAC school and then came back and beat a Big Ten school 66-7. So I think college football is weird. Anything can happen. So obviously, it's not Miami's obviously never going to be the favorite, but there are things that can happen that can set them up for a win.
I think for Notre Dame, one of their biggest worries in the Notre Dame defense, Miami offense situation, is probably going to be Jack Holdiron, honestly. I think that his abilities, his talent levels is something that's going to really jump out to them. You'll probably see a lot of maybe Jack Kaiser kind of picking him up, just like those additional linebackers, those speed linebackers. Osbury's going to probably be a guy that'll be in their matchup against him a little bit. They might bring a safety down, like a guy like Xavier Watts to kind of pick him up on a few plays, but that's a guy who, with his multifacets of talent, can kind of really give Notre Dame fits as well. And they've had tight ends they've struggled against tight ends in the past. I mean, that Northern Illinois game, it was a lot more the running back, but Texas A&M, for how rough they were in that game, their tight ends got to make a couple plays. Their wide receivers just kind of let them down.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to take a jump and look at Notre Dame's offense right before we have to let Tim go. I want to start with Jeremiah Love.
Yes, my guy.
That dude's a machine. I mean, I've just been super impressed with his body of work. 8 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns, 270 plus yards. I mean, what can't he do?
He's awesome. Insane. And he's not alone. That's the scary part. Jadarian Price is there as well, who also has the ability to kind of break away big runs and is more physical than Jeremiah, where Jeremiah is more agile. But Texas A&M had a huge breakout run. Price did. I think Purdue had a pretty decent couple runs as well. Yeah, the running back room's great. It's probably the best I remember Notre Dame in the running back room in a while. I know, what's his name, Kyron Williams, who's playing for the Rams right now, was obviously awesome at Notre Dame, but I didn't think he'd be as good as he is in the NFL. But they haven't really had a 1-2 headed monster like that in a long time. And like you said, like Jeremiah Love is like stopping Jeremiah Love is much easier said than done for sure. You look at what Purdue tried to do against him, and I think the first drive he had a 50 burger on the field. So they're two really talented dudes. I think that's kind of, and then obviously the ability of Leonard to run the ball as well. That is the Notre Dame offense. It's like the old dudes love it, right? It's just like the old Notre Dame, put your head down and run, hit the hole and run really hard. And they do that. It's just that, they also do have really good players out there as well to go, like Mitchell Evans and, a couple of really good wide receivers, Jaden Greathouse and things like that. And they just kind of like, yeah, but we got Jeremiah Love and he's a great safety blanket.
Yeah. What was I going to say? We've talked obviously a lot about Riley Leonard and his ceiling, but Tim, Ted, any wide receivers in that core that stands out to you, even with Leonard kind of obviously
Bo Collins,
their impact?
Yeah, Bo Collins, the Clemson transfer. I think he's probably been their most reliable of the wide receivers. I don't know if that's more him or Riley Leonard. I still really suspect Chris Mitchell is going to have one of these games pretty soon where he's going to have a huge big game for them. And then Mitchell Evans. I mean, Mitchell Evans is awesome. He's one of the top tight ends in the country for a reason. He's starting to get healthy, which is nice from his ACL tear last year. So if they can figure out a way to throw the ball downhill, they have the guys that can, help them out. It's just going from Sam Hartman to Riley Leonard has been a very big difference.
Jordan Faison should be coming back this week.
That's
He's
right.
Healthy. He's listed on the depth chart for the first time in a little bit since his ankle injury. He's a weapon on the outside. We'll see how much he's actually used. We'll see how healthy he is, because especially with wide receivers, these kind of high ankle sprains can linger a lot longer. So we'll see how much Faison is used, but he's someone to look out for if he's fully healthy. He could be an absolute game wrecker.
All right. Well, now the big question that I'm sure a lot of Red Hawk fans will be asking, myself included, how do we scheme for them? Like, how do we limit their effectiveness? Obviously, we talked about keeping Leonard, limiting his effectiveness, but when you have guys like Jeremiah Love and the receivers that you two talked about, like what do you have to do on defense to, limit their effectiveness?
Might have to blitz a lot. Might have to bring your safeties down quite a bit to the line of scrimmage. Might have to be one of those games where just kind of fill as many gaps as you possibly can, because you're risking the shot of Love getting to the outside, which is where he's most dangerous in that circumstance. But I don't really know. Like I said, I fully believe Miami can go to Notre Dame and win this game. I'm not putting that out of the picture by any means. But if Jeremiah Love has another one of these 125-yard, 2-touchdown games, I mean, that's the whole thing you have to stop. And that's still, I mean, if you do that, you got a very easy chance. You got a very good chance winning this game. I just don't know if they have what it takes at the moment to do so.
I think, Tim, you said it best with a lot of blitzing, especially pulling the safeties down. Last week, Purdue, they played single high safety a little bit less than they probably should have. But what they did, which was the mistake, was when they would play single high safety, they would pull their safety down and they put them on the outside to stop Love from going on the outside. And then Love would just take these 4-yard gains up the middle every time. And where that gets to a problem is when you're trying to blitz and all of a sudden it's a play action where tight end is Mitchell Evans is coming up the seam. He's wide open because you're blitzing. And now you have your safety jumping on the play action because you think he's going to go over the middle. We're trying to play it here. So that's a 4-yard run. And then as you can see here, number 31, that safety just pulls down, which led to the touchdown. So glad we were able to get that to work. But
nicely done, Jack. That was very impressive.
Yeah, I'll run it one more time. So
as we look here again, Love 4 yards up the middle, and then it's 31, that safety. He drops down looking for that outside run. Love looks like he's going up the middle on a play action, leaves the seam wide open because he got single high safety. He's picking which side of the field to look at and to cover, and it led to a touchdown. So I think timely blitzes are going to be really helpful for Miami, but don't go too blitz heavy, especially coming outside in, if you're going to blitz, just go up the middle inside.
Yeah, this is all that's probably the way it's going to have to be done. But I mean, we saw last week we could have game planned as well as we could have against Corey Kiner, and he still torched us for however many yards it was on the ground and 6 yards of carry. Like Miami struggled against running backs, especially good running backs, for a number of years now. I mean, we talked about it last week with like the 250-yard games. I think there was 3 last year and the 1 last week. So the running game and stopping it has always been a problem for Miami, especially the last couple of years. So we can talk about, like, yes, the blitz, like how to blitz and like what they should do. But in reality, like good running backs have been a taboo point for Miami for the last couple of years. So I just don't know if we have enough wherewithal to deal with that one more time.
I hope so, man. I was hoping if Notre Dame was going to lose to a MAC team, it wouldn't be Northern Illinois, it'd be Miami.
That would have been a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's good clicks for the site if Miami wins this game.
Yeah.
Not Northern Illinois.
All right. Well, Tim, I got one more Notre Dame question for you. We kind of have the tale of two coaches here, where we've got Chuck Martin on one end, who's kind of the grizzled old vet of the game.
Former Notre Dame staff member, yeah.
Yeah, and we also have Marcus Freeman, who's kind of the new age, the style of coach that teams are looking to hire, where it's this young guy who brings in a culture and brings in a style of play. And he's really, I mean, obviously the loss last week was tough, but I mean, he showcased it against Texas A&M. Now that's a tough road game to go in and win.
Yeah, it is.
What do you think is the difference between having a coach like Martin and having a coach like Marcus Freeman?
So I love Chuck Martin, so I don't want to say that I think one's better than the other, per se. I do think Chuck Martin could be a really successful coach at a high major D1 school. I really think he does. I'm glad he's at Miami. But with Marcus Freeman, and I can attest this more just comparing him to Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly won a lot of games with Notre Dame, but wasn't very likable, right? Like, still not very likable. And Marcus Freeman is like that kind of dude. And where Brian Kelly may have been a better X's and O's coach, I think Marcus Freeman's a better communicator. I think he's more relatable to these guys because he is a little younger, right? He also played high major college football at Ohio State, and he's a really good recruiter. So I think that what he's kind of made for Notre Dame more attractive is just kind of making a situation where players love to show up to work every day for Marcus Freeman. And I think why, like when they have these rough losses, like the Marshall game a couple of years ago, when they lost at Louisville last year, which I think is a better loss than people act like it was. And then the Clemson loss, and then, this one, and immediately everyone's like, fire Marcus Freeman, fire Marcus Freeman. It's like, have you looked at these recruiting classes? Like, Brian Kelly was not getting athletes like this. And I think Marcus Freeman's just personality and the fact that the team takes on his personality just makes all the difference in the world. So you probably can tell by this conversation, I'm a huge fan of Marcus Freeman, and I want him to succeed really badly at Notre Dame, not just because he's the coach, just because he's a very likable dude. And I think that he deserves all the credit in the world for kind of, making people want to play at Notre Dame. And, like I said, Brian Kelly put a lot of kids in the NFL, won a lot of games, but the atmosphere and the feeling is just different with Marcus Freeman at the helm.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak for Miami. I'm sure Ted will add to this too. Like, even though it's completely different styles of coaching, Coach Martin has become kind of a mini celebrity.
We have the right. We're around these guys. We can say. I don't
know if I'm familiar enough yet, but I mean, he's become a mini celebrity in Oxford. Like, he's become a guy that the team and the town rallies around. I mean, we kind of saw it on social media over the summer and right before the season started, when Coach Martin made some headlines, talking about Alabama and talking about Graham Nicholson, and then obviously talking about like the technology on the sidelines. And a lot of the comments were resoundingly negative around him and saying like, oh, he's just, he's at a group of 5 school. Obviously he's going to stay that. But the Red Hawk media really rallied around him, and Miami students rallied around him on social media as well. So, I mean, obviously 2 different styles of coaches, but still really cool to see that both styles work in their own respective environments.
Yeah, I really like Chuck Martin when he was at Notre Dame. I wouldn't have been against if he got a shot to be the head coach. I'm happy things worked out the way they did. Don't get me wrong, but I'm always going to root for Chuck Martin as long as he's not coaching at the University of Clifton.
All right. Well, with that, I think it's time to jump into our big question of the week. Last week, we talked about the rushing game and how we hoped it got better. Obviously, this week it did not. But this week, we want to talk about what this Miami's ceiling is. We're going into week 3 now, or week 4, excuse me, and now we've got losses to Northwestern and Cincinnati on our belt. And as much as we'd love to say Miami has a shot in this game, there's a very realistic chance that Miami goes into this game or goes into week 5 0-3. So with an 0-3 record, what's this team's ceiling? What's the next step?
I mean, I still think that everything's winnable from here on out. Yeah, they might lose Notre Dame. They might beat Notre Dame. But UMass, Toledo, Eastern Michigan, they can win. They should win all 3 of those games. Ohio, obviously, I know there's a lot riding on that game each and every year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their toughest game of the year is Northern Illinois the rest of the season, right? And you guys are the guys who follow this team very much closer than I do. I just play with them on college football quite a bit. You think they can win that game for sure, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Ted, anything else to add?
Yeah, I like what Tim said. I mean, if Miami starts 0-3, it's not the end of the world. Those are 3 Power 5 schools, as much as people don't like the fact that Northwestern's in the Big Ten, but those are 3 Power 5 schools. And look, the games, if they lose at Notre Dame and it's close, the games are close. It's not like they got, it's not like they got their teeth kicked in. These are close games, and Miami has to take it on the chin and move on. But they got UMass coming up. If they don't beat UMass, then it's time to hit the panic button.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. That's homecoming too. So then that's trouble.
Oh yeah. That's double no. That's double no bueno.
Yeah.
So, they got Massachusetts coming up. Toledo they should beat. Eastern Michigan they should beat. Ohio they should beat. Central Michigan they should beat. Ball State, Kent State. Yeah, Northern Illinois. That's a team that probably scares some fans a little bit just because of what they saw versus Notre Dame. But it's the MAC. The greatest thing about the MAC is that you can beat a top 5 team, but when you play versus another MAC school, you could look absolutely dazed and confused and not play your best football. Realistically, the team that scares me the most is Bowling Green with Terry and Stewart in the backfield. I mean, how are they going to stop him? But if you look at their schedule, there aren't a ton of schools that I look at where I'm saying, oh man, like this could be a trap game for Miami. Well, okay, trap game is not the word I was looking for. This could be a losable game for Miami. Every one of these games for the rest of the season is winnable. The trap game will probably be versus a Kent State or Northern Illinois, Bowling Green's one of these last 3 games at the end of the year. It just comes down to the run defense. If they can fix the run defense even just a little bit, this is a much better team than what they're showing.
Yeah, I'm just curious as like what the record is going to be to get into the Detroit game, to get into the MAC championship, because this is probably the most parity or more parity than we had last year, where it was just kind of Toledo and Miami the whole way. Like Northern Illinois is good, Toledo's good. They just put a beating on Mississippi State, I think it was, and Bowling Green, as you said, is really good. So that's 3 teams all in the MAC that are really playing good football to start the season. So I don't know if any of these teams is going to go like 8-1 like they did.
And you said it best. There's a ton of parity, but there's no there's no divisions this year, which severely hurts teams. It's not East versus West anymore. It's top 2 records, or you go and play, and it's happening because of the conference realignment, because UMass is joining the MAC next year, so there would be uneven teams on either side. But you're right. What is the record that Miami needs? Because they sit at 0-2. They sit at 0-2 right now. They may be 0-3. That'll be bottom of the conference. Toledo's sitting at 3-0. Northern Illinois is 2-0. You got Buffalo, Eastern Michigan, Ohio, all at 2-1. The rest are 1-1 or 1-2. Miami will have to win out. If they start 0-3, they'll have to go 9-3. And who's to say that Toledo doesn't go 10-2 with one of those losses being to Miami, and Northern Illinois doesn't go 10-2 with one of those losses being to Miami? Even if they win out, can they get to Detroit?
Right. And I think that's what's scary. Like we talked at the beginning of the season, and I was talking before we started this podcast, where I said, if this Miami team goes 3-1 in non-conference, we're looking, whoever that one loss may have been, we're looking at maybe a playoff berth. But now, like, it's a complete 180. Like, we're looking at a completely different situation now.
Yeah, if best case scenario, non-conference play, they go 2-2, which would be not ideal, but it's not 1-3 or 0-4. And you're right. You know, if they went 3-1 and then they end up winning the MAC, you're looking at some sort of higher tier bowl game. But I don't know, just 9-3 trying to get to the MAC championship when you have these teams that are so close to each other in terms of the skill level and the parity and whatever it may be. 9-3 just doesn't feel enough.
Right. And another thing I want to think about too is so many players on this Red Hawk defense and on this offense too came back for one more shot at maybe, like, we mentioned the playoff. Obviously that was a long shot then, and obviously now it's even more of a long shot. But even like a New Year's Six or like a high level bowl game, and now we're staring down the barrel of 0-3. Like, how does that affect these guys? Like, how does it affect the leaders in that locker room?
I think they just feel defeated because the whole thing at the end of last year was who's coming back, who's gonna leave, who's gonna come back, and Miami made a big and these players made a big statement, right? Every player got one of those graphics on social media that says, "I love these last couple of years. I'm back for one last ride. I'm back for one more shot." And if they win out and they fall short, these guys are just going to feel absolutely gutted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we saw it. I mean, obviously these guys had great success last year in Detroit, and we saw what was an awesome performance by that team then. But I think I can't remember exactly who had what, but I know some of the graphics had the little playoff logo on the bottom. And that seemed like this was the statement they were making, that they were coming back for a shot at this expanded playoff. And I think as much as they won't say it in the press or like in press conferences or on social media, like that has to sting a little bit. That now that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I want to say Kobe Hilton, Matt Solopek, the leaders of the defense, Ty Wise, they all had the little CFP logo at the bottom of their graphic. Whether that was hidden or large enough for people to really see it, but you're absolutely right. They started this season with incredibly high hopes. The Northwestern game was a game they should have won. In all honesty, that was a game they should have won, and it's tough to sit here and say that they lost that game. Cincinnati is a coin flip. Could have gone either way. Unfortunately, went Cincinnati's way. And now Notre Dame, people going in might have said, okay, chalk this one up to the loss. If Miami's 3-1, this is their one loss. But now, as we've kind of mentioned, it's a little more like, okay, Miami can win this game. But even so, they come out of this most likely 2-2 if they win this game.
Mm-hmm.
Again, hopefully they don't lose to UMass. But that is not what anybody in that locker room was expecting. They did not want to come out of this 2-2 or 1-3. And I just think the morale in the locker room because of this is so much worse than where it needs to be at this point in the season. It's still early, and they can turn it around, absolutely, and they're playing good football. We're kind of sitting here making it sound like it's a bit of a sob story and this team is not playing well. No, they're playing good football. They just need to put it together for 4 quarters.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, we're reaching the end of our time here. Tim, thank you for joining us for the Notre Dame preview.
Thanks, guys. This is fun.
Yeah.
Keep this up. This is awesome. We're really happy that you guys are doing this. So we're definitely excited about the Miami coverage. So
it'll be coming thick and fast once we get into the coming weeks, especially when MAC starts, when it's on Wednesdays.
That's right. They have a Wednesday home game this year, right?
I think I know we have at least one per year because we've had one every year since I've been here.
Yeah, because the Tuesday game's a road game. I think it's Ball State, if I remember correctly.
That sounds right. Yeah, I think we have Central. No, it's a weekend game. Is it Ohio that's midweek?
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I want to say it is Ohio because usually they do battle the bricks on like a Tuesday night, or they have done in
No,
years past.
it's a Saturday. It is a Saturday.
Okay, that I think is smart.
Yeah.
Realistically, I think having it on a Saturday where people can actually come and they don't say like, "Oh, I got class, 8:30 Wednesday morning."
Well, that kids can come in from Athens for that game.
Yeah.
And we can have a similar situation that we had on Saturday. As crowded as it was very fun. I think our home game is Kent State,
Nice.
which will be fun towards the end of the season too. So that's playoff crunch time. That's going to Detroit.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, here's to hoping we make a return trip this year. Thank you guys for coming on this week. We'll be back next Thursday with the Notre Dame recap, however that game goes, and previewing UMass. So we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.